This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Ashwin, let me know like when I can start. Okay, so I'll wait for your call. Okay, so let's start our session for today, right? My name is Mohan, and I'm going to give you the demo for the Angular 5. In fact, okay, it is Angular 6. And I'll go through a few of the slides. If you have any questions, okay, you can pause me in between and you can ask. By the way, okay, if I'm not audible, just let me know, so that you can just send a message, right? And then I can correct my microphone. Yeah, so this course is okay, it's sponsored by Campaign Solutions and Career IT. So we both collaborated to provide you this course. Fine. So to introduce myself, uh, I have 14 years of experience in software industry. I initially started working on core C, C++, and then I moved on to Java J2E, and now okay, I'm basically working on the cloud native solutions. Most of my work is based on the cloud native. Cloud native, it involves okay, the end-to-end optimization. When I say end-to-end, it means starting from the UI to the messaging and okay, the database as well. So in all those things, okay, finding an optimized solution, right? So that's where okay, I have my expertise on. And also I developed various reactive applications Angular store, and also I developed various internationalization components. I mean, basically it is nothing but it is called as a localization. Okay. There are a few streaming based applications also which I worked on, wherein I had to develop an app like, okay, which is similar to YouTube, but it is internally, it is meant for an internal training purpose. So that like, okay, the people can upload their videos and then like, okay, they can stream it. So that's what like my major expertise is. And before that, like, okay, I have written all sorts of logics, like, okay, I mean, it could be an algorithms, like, or it could be a business logic in Java J2E. All that legacy stuff, like I still have it behind me, right? So there's the new stuff, like, okay, which I'm working on. My other areas of interest are like, apart from Java J2E and the cloud technologies, I'm also like very inspired of like, okay, very much inspired of the Node.js architecture, and of course the new Go language concurrency, right? And my hobbies are like, okay, basically teaching and exploring the new concepts. It's teaching is like, I mean, I find I will find the simple ways like, okay, to teach it. I mean, I don't make it like too complicated. That's how like, okay, I teach. And this is my 25th batch. Okay, I mean, Angular, Java, J2E, and then the other courses, like, okay, this is my 25th batch. And the main principle I'll be following is like the simplicity, right? To keep things simple, don't make it over complicated, so that people don't get, okay, bored enough. Okay, fine. That's about me. And why you have to take this course is like, we don't quickly go through the concepts just for the purpose of like, okay, teaching the course. That's not our main goal, right? And or not like, okay, we finish the course, stay back and relax, right? So our approach is like, okay, the design first, like, okay, what are the concepts, like, okay, you learn where is that like real applicable in the real world project scenarios. So okay, so that is where like, okay, this course is a little bit different from the other Angular courses. Okay, so in the aspects like, okay, so what exactly is the Angular, right? I mean, what exactly is the architecture, and what are the components, right? So, and how to like, okay, write the components, where to use different sorts of components, right? So those are the things like, okay, you'll be learning throughout the course. And that said, like I won't make it like, okay, over complicated. I will keep it simple as much as I can, right? and and also like, okay, as I teach the concepts, I'll connect the dots. Connecting the dots in the sense like, okay, it's like you learn 2 3 concepts, right? How we connect all those 3 concepts in order to make you understand with an example, right? So that is how like this course goes on. And how these concepts are really helpful in the real-time projects. What are the scenarios like, okay, where it is really helpful, right? So this is what will give you a very good idea about like, okay, how not only about Angular, but also like, okay, how to use it. Okay, all right. So why Angular, right? So we have like the HTML JavaScript, right? So we can pretty much write a single page application, right, by using HTML JavaScript. Then why to choose Angular, right? So always like, okay, the necessity is the mother of invention, right? I mean, when there is a necessity, like, okay, that is where like, okay, these new technologies will come in. That said, like, okay, what was the necessity for the Angular to be in the market was writing the code in HTML and JavaScript. It's not that easy to maintain, right? I mean, there is no there is no disciplinary kind of code like, okay, you can introduce or like, okay, you can tell the developer saying like, hey, like you write your code in this fashion, only then like, okay, I'll accept it. Though you impose those kind of restrictions, still like, okay, the developer has that flexibility wherein like he can write the code in his own way, right? He can write it in his simple terms, or like, okay, he can make it over complicated um, by using lambdas and all the stuff, right? So that is where like, okay, there is no discipline in the JavaScript world. So that's why it's a disrupted language, because like you can write it in your own way. Like there are n ways of like, okay, doing multiple things, right? So what is a component means? If you ask a JavaScript developer, he will give multiple definitions, like what is a component and how to write it. So Angular brings in that kind of discipline, right? The discipline in the sense like, okay, okay, it brings in few concepts and it makes you stick around those concepts, right? And if you learn those concepts, you should be you are like okay very well versed in Angular, and you can write any Angular application. Okay, that is what the Angular brings into this UI world, right? So are there any other frameworks apart from Angular? Yes, there are other frameworks. Like we do have the components concepts in the React framework and all the stuff. But Angular is like okay gaining the traction because like okay because the kind of popularity like it gained in the last 2 to 3 years. Okay, and why it gained popularity is right. So those are like okay few things. I mean, this is one of the trivial question. Like okay, I will ask um, anyone like okay who is looking for a job, who has like okay applied for an Angular job. Why did you choose Angular, right? So these are the main things like okay why we choose Angular. One is like okay it brings the modularization, right? So now you have a better way of like dividing your project into multiple modules. That's not the case with like if you go with the JavaScript, with HTML JavaScript. I mean, though you can do it by using some kind of discipline in the code, but it's very hard to follow. But Angular brings in the true modularization, what a module is, right? So that's what the Angular really brings into the language. Now, what is a component? Always like okay, people will say like n number of definitions for the component, but for Angular, the component definition is very clear. And with these concepts, like okay, there is a better maintenance. So like even if there are like okay hundreds of developers who are developing one single application on Angular, right? It can be maintained easily. What is meant by maintenance, right? Maintenance is nothing but like okay, you can read the code easily. You can try to understand like okay the specifics um, um, of the components, like okay, what are the components like okay, and how it is created. Not only that, Angular has a very good tooling that means like if you write any Angular application, you can easily debug that application by using these tools, right? So it has got very good tooling. So that is an added advantage of like why we have to use Angular. And of course, like okay, it supports the modern reactive based concepts also. Okay. And finally, like okay, it has a good community support. Fine. So before going to the next slide, I want to go to this slide over here to explain you like, okay, how exactly like, okay, this Angular architecture like, okay, really looks like, right? Um, one second, give me 1 second. Let me check like, if there are any messages in the chat. Okay. All right. So there are no messages. Fine. So typically like, okay, if I'm writing a banking application, right? So in banking application, you have like when you talk about the banking application, you'll talk about the different modules in banking application, right? So on the server side also, like you will say, if you are, I have like, okay, I'm using Java J2E, and these are the different modules like, okay, which will participate in building this banking application. You can easily map those modules in UI also now with Angular, okay? So with Angular, you have that flexibility wherein now you can really talk in terms of module, okay? What is a module, right? Um, and what are the different modules like which are participating in the application? So in this case, in our banking application, there are 4 different modules, right? We have deposits, reporting, loan, and the transaction module, right? And all these are like the ones like which you are seeing in the orange, they are all modules. And the ones like which are connected to these modules are nothing but they are components. That means each module comes with its own set of components. And if another module want to use that particular component, let's say for example, like okay, banking application itself is a module, right? If it wants to use a component in the deposits module, it has to import that particular deposits module and it can use it. Okay, so that is how like okay Angular brings in that kind of discipline. Like okay, if at all if you want to use any particular component, first of all you need to import it, and then only like okay you can use it. So just like, okay, if you write any Java application, like if you want to import any class, right? I mean, you can't use the class directly, right? So you had to like, okay, namespace it, right? So that namespace, like, okay, you will import it, correct? And then you can use the class. In the same way, here, the concept is like, okay, you will import the module into the other module like which it would like to use it and use the components in that particular module. Now, don't worry about like, okay, the different colors, like you have it in the components. We will touch base on those different types of components like when we go through the course, okay? And same is the case with other modules also. Like, okay, every module now has its own set of components, right? So this is what the beauty of Angular is. So you can have like, okay, few developers working over here, you can have few developers working over here, right? On each and every module. So if someone is writing, so a very easy way to find out whether a candidate really has an exposure on Angular or not is, right? So what I do is like, okay, I usually see the resume and I'll see like, okay, what are the modules like, okay, which he has worked. If I didn't find any module with the word module in his resume, then I mean, then that means like, okay, that guy hasn't worked anything on the Angular, okay, and he is not taken into the consideration. So every time, like, okay, you write your or like you prepare your resume, make sure like, okay, you specify the modules like, okay, which you worked on, okay. So that is what will like, okay, catch the interviewer eye, and then like, okay, he can consider you. Fine. Um, so it's not only the modules, right? So it's not only the modules and the components. There are like, okay, other artifacts like, okay, which the Angular provides. The other artifacts were like the services, right? If you have to interact with the remote data, right? Which is nothing but you need to make an HTTP call and then you need to make a REST call and then download the data, right? So that is where like, okay, you'll be using services. Directives is something like which is close to component. It's kind of like, okay, you can assume it is like um, it's a parent of a component. In fact, like, okay, all the components are derived from the directives, but directive has its own definition. That means like directive can work on an existing HTML element, whereas component has its own template, right, and own tag. Okay. So that is the basic difference between a component and director. Don't worry about that stuff, but on a high level, like, okay, this is what the difference is. And the pipes, right? So the pipes, if anyone is from the Unix background, they should be aware of like, okay, what pipe is, right? Pipe is nothing but like, okay, the output of one operation is sent as an input to the next operation. So you can pipe n number of operations and then you can pass it through the pipeline. Okay, so that is what the pipe is. And where do we use pipe? Basically, like, okay, if you want to convert, especially the localization, right, the internationalization components, like which I discussed earlier in the deck, right, in one of the slides. So we used pipes a lot, and those pipes are basically like depending upon the country, we have to change the money format. Depending upon the country, we had to change the time zone, right? So there are like, okay, local specific attributes like which you need to change. So all that can be taken care by pipes. So that is where like pipes are really helpful. Okay. Any questions? Am I going fast? You can pause me. I mean, or like just put a message saying like I'm fast. I can slow down so that I can slow down. Right. So I call these artifacts as Angular nouns. Okay, this is a new word like, okay, which we came with, and the reason like why we call it as nouns is like, okay, because they are in fact nouns, right? As you can see, like, okay, each one is a name by itself, right? And they have and they're pretty much like, okay, you can correlate with an actual noun, English noun, right? So that's why I'm calling it as Angular nouns. All right. And what are the required tool set like which you need to have in order to like run Angular programs, right? So these are the required softwares. I call it as toolset, but anyone call it as software, it's up to them. But these are like, okay, the different softwares like which are required in order to install Angular and also run the Angular programs. So the very first thing is the Node.js. So if you go to your browser here, say Node.js and download, click on the first link, which is download Node.js, and then click on this home button here. You'll find two different versions of Node.js here, right? One is the version like, okay, which have the new set of features, but it is not stable. Okay, on the left hand side you will get the stable version. Okay, so here in this case 8.12 is the stable version, so you can download that version and you should be all set. Okay, once you download it, like, okay, you'll be on Windows machine, it's an exe file. Just click on the exe file. It will show you the wizard. Okay, click next, 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 and then finish. Okay, it should be pretty straightforward. All right, so what Node.js really does is, right, a simple background of Node.js. It basically like it's one of the I mean, few call it as a framework, of course, but I call it as a language, because it has it is a server side JavaScript engine. Basically, like what the Node.js developers did was, the designers did was like, okay, they took the Chrome engine JavaScript and they reused the same Chrome engine for the server side applications. Okay, not only that, like Node.js comes with the package manager, okay, which is what like, okay, Angular really uses it. And what the package manager does is like it will download all the dependencies which are required for a software to get it to install. Okay, just like it is similar to the Maven in Java, right? In Maven also, like when you specify the required dependencies, and it will automatically pull the dependencies and also its sub dependencies, right? The same thing, like, okay, the Node.js package manager also does. One thing I would like to emphasize was like once you install Node.js, if you want to like check whether the Node.js has been installed or not, just type in this command saying node-v. So this will show the Node version. Okay, there is another command which you can use, which is npm-v, and that will also show a version. Okay, which means if it shows a version, that means like, okay, the software is installed properly. Okay, so that is an indication of like, okay, the software got installed successfully. All right, so the difference between the node and the npm, I don't want to discuss a lot, but just a small snippet here. Like the node is meant to run the Node.js program. npm is meant for like pulling the dependencies for the which are required for the program. Okay, npm is basically the package manager, node package manager. All right. So the first thing, Node.js is for sure like, okay, you need to install it. And the second thing is Angular CLI, right? So if we click on Angular CLI download, click on this one and click on this get started here. So it's going to give you the instructions like, okay, how to install Angular CLI. Okay, so npm install -g @angular/CLI. So this is going to install the Angular CLI package for you. Okay, and it is ready to use. So why we use Angular CLI? Because Angular CLI comes with the required toolset to build your Angular applications. So what, you can ask me like, okay, what I'm talking about, right? What is this build process and all this stuff, right? So this is it's very important to know like, okay, how this Angular application really runs. Okay, Angular application is typically written in TypeScript. Okay, so TypeScript is the language which is preferred for Angular to write Angular applications. Not that it is mandatory, but you can also use JavaScript. It's up to you. But in JavaScript, like, it is very difficult to write Angular applications. Most of the community today in Angular, they will write the developers usually they'll write it in TypeScript. Okay, but the browser can understand only JavaScript, right? So there should be a transpilation process, right? Transpilation in the sense like, okay, there should be a conversion process, which will convert your TypeScript language into JavaScript. And who does that? It is all done by a component called Webpack. So that Webpack component is hosted by Angular CLI. Okay. So Webpack, what it does is like, okay, it does have all the required tool set, which is going to convert your TypeScript, which is nothing but your actual Angular program, into JavaScript, and it's going to like produce all the required JavaScript bundles and all this stuff. We'll see that like how the translation process really goes on when we like go through the course. Okay, I mean when we are into the chapter, like I'll explain you the translation process. All right, so so that is the reason like okay you need the Angular CLI. The next one is the VS Code, which is nothing but an IDE. Okay, so as you can see on the toolbar over here on my Mac, so you'll see this particular application, which is nothing but VS Code. Okay, and in order to install it, again, it's very simple. All you have to do is like go here and say VS Code download, right? So click on this one, and over here, depending upon your operating system, you can download that version of VS Code. Okay, and the way it looks like is like okay, this is all like it looks like. So you can see here like I mean all your Angular related projects will be written in VS Code. VS Code is an open source software which is from Microsoft, and it gives you all the required plugins here, like okay, as you can see it here, for TypeScript, JavaScript, Go, Java, and all the applications like okay, you can actually run it in this IDE itself. It's a powerful open source IDE. It's gaining traction nowadays. It's good to download this one. You can write your application in the other editors also, but I prefer like okay, you better download VS Code. All right, so that's about the VS Code. Okay, so the next tool is nothing but it's called as an Augury tool, right? So Augury is a Chrome plugin. Okay, so let me open Angular IO, right? It's a Chrome plugin, and in order to install Augury, all you have to do is like type in Augury Chrome extension. So once you click on Augury Chrome extension, then it's going to show you this Augury Chrome web store. So click on this. So since like I already have it installed, it's asking me to remove from the Chrome, but you'll find something like an install button over here. You can click on install, and that will install it. And you can see like okay, over here it already shows the Augury extension. Okay, but this is not where like okay we'll be using it. If in any Angular application you would like to use the Augury, you have to go to the developer tools, and in the developer tools you will find something like an Augury here. Okay, so yeah, so basically what Augury really does is like okay, it's not showing the relevant information in here. But what it basically does is like it will show you all the modules which your app is using. It also shows the components, okay, which your app is using, right? And also the services and all the information, okay, it's going to show you. So if someone wants to like okay get an overall idea about your application, right? So this is a very good starting point. So click on Augury, you can see the modules like okay, which are participating in your application, right? Click on that module, you will see the components which are being used by that particular application, right? And from there on, you can drill down and you can ask the relevant questions to your subordinates who knows very well about the app, right? And they can provide information. So that is how like usually people are on board, right? So they will start debugging the application. Okay, so it's a very good, very useful tool. and it also provides nice debugging kind of stuff, like okay, which you can use it. All right, so this is about Augury, and this is must. So all these tools are like okay, these are like okay, the tools like okay, which are actually used in the project. Okay, so that's where okay, so I listed down all these tools. The next one is the Redux Dev Tools. We use Redux Dev Tools basically for the NGRX store applications. Okay, in Angular, there is a reactive component or like okay, the reactive model, which is nothing but NGRX store. In order to debug NGRX store based applications, you will use this Redux Dev Tools. Okay, so that is also a Chrome extension, and you can download it. So when we go through the chapter, like okay, I'll explain you like how to download Redux Dev Tools. And for the testing purpose, like we'll be using any REST tool, basically like to just test your backend, right? Because when we go through the course, like okay, we'll be using a simple mock based backend server. Okay, when I say mock based backend server means like okay, all our responses will be mocked, and that will be hosted on a Node.js server. Okay, and we'll be using that server, and all those calls are like the REST calls. So just if you would like to test it, like okay, you can use any REST based tool, and you can test it. Okay, I'll show you all those things. Okay, don't worry about this stuff. But this is the required toolset level which we require uh, to learn this course. Actually, these are very useful in your real time projects as well. Fine. So I'll take a pause over here, and then I would like to move on to the course details, right? So we went through like okay 7 slides, which is good enough, I guess. So let's go through the course content. Let's try to understand like okay, what we are going to really learn. So as I explained you today, we already discussed about the Angular architecture, right? So which usually they call it as like the component-based architecture, right? So we already discussed about this chapter. Now the next thing is like okay, the project setup, like okay, how to install the Angular project and the required tools and all this stuff, right? The prerequisites is like okay, you need to have all these tools installed in order to start with an Angular project. Okay, and then I'm going to show you like okay, what are the different files like okay, which are like important in the Angular project. You need to understand the flow. Actually, the flow is also included here in the 8th slide, but I don't want to cover it today because it will be too beyond like okay, what we have discussed. Okay, so I mean I don't want to go over complicated, right? I don't want to make things over complicated, go beyond like your expectation. Okay, so I want to keep things simple, so I'll take up this one in the next session. Okay, this is the flow, the actual Angular. Fine. I'll also discuss about the different modes like okay, which we have, which you need to know while setting up the Angular project. Fine. The third one is like okay, you will learn about what this one-way data flow paradigm is, right? So it's a paradigm in the sense like okay, if you call it as a design pattern, and one must know about this particular design pattern. It is very important. Okay, most of the Angular developers like today in the market, they doesn't know anything about what one-way data flow is, right? Simply think like okay, Angular comes out of box with this two-way data binding, and let's use it. But there are so many performance implications, okay, with the two-way data binding, and that is the reason like okay, the one-way data flow has been introduced. So this is one of the design pattern which Angular says for the developers to follow when they lay out the components in the module, right? And you need to follow this design pattern. And the next thing is like it's not about just writing a component, right? So the key or the crucial uh, part in your application is the data, right? So you need to know how to bind the data to your template. Template is nothing but your HTML or view, right? And how the data flows from the component to its view, right? So all those bindings like okay, you'll be learning in this 4th chapter. And by the way, all these are like the basic concepts, okay? In 80% of the projects, right? Um, they use these basic concepts only. Most of for the beginners and the intermediate developers, right? They use these basic concepts. I mean, there are advanced concepts also, like, but that is meant for like the performance tuning and what are the other things like, okay, which developers need to know, if at all, if they are going beyond the component-based architecture, right? So, but all these things are like, they are the basic concepts of Angular. Next, we'll discuss about the Angular directives. Angular comes with a rich set of directives. There are a few like which you need to know, which you'll be using it often in your projects also. So we'll be discussing about those directives and how to use them, right? What are the different ways to use those directives, right? So we'll see each one with an example, okay? And then we'll revisit this one-way data flow. And over here, like, okay, I'll discuss about few of the component details. Okay, so what are the best practices, like, okay, to write the components, how you should design your components, right? And how the data has to flow from one component to the other component, which is nothing but the inter-component communication. Okay, so how those components really communicate, right? And what is the importance of mutability, right? So there is a lot of talk happening these days around the immutability to improve the performance. So, and Angular also is nothing short, right? Okay, I mean, um, it does tell developers like, okay, you need to follow the laws of immutability, and it's good to follow. Okay, Angular is, by the way, like, okay, it's not a library, it's a framework, which means like every framework has its own life cycle events, right? So, which means like if you write a component, it has its own life cycle, right? So you need to know about those life cycle events over here, hooks over here. I'm sorry, they're not events, but the hooks. Uh, the basic ones are like the on initialize and on changes. By using these two concepts, I'll explain you like, okay, how you can achieve immutability, right? So that is what like we'll be discussing. The next one is the template forms. Basically, there are two types of forms in Angular. One is template driven forms, which is basically like dependent on the template, not on the data. And there is model driven forms, which we'll be discussing in the advanced concepts, which is data driven, okay, not the template driven. So in the template forms, your data has to follow the template rules. But whereas in the model driven forms, your template has to follow the data rules. Okay. So that's what the difference is. The next one, okay, till here we discussed about all about the components and all the stuff, right? Now, in this chapter, we'll discuss about how to fetch the real-time data, right? How to make a REST call, how to fetch the data, right? What are the different types of HTTP calls like we have it, right? And all these calls are asynchronous, right? So how you have to make your component vigilant so that okay, it can actually listen for that particular observable once it has the data. Once the service has the data, like okay, how it is being passed over to the component. So all those dots, like okay, we'll be connecting in this chapter. And of course, like we will also be discussing about the single page application concepts, because nowadays all the mobile based and the web based applications are all single page applications, right? So SPS, how to develop a SPA is nothing but single page application. How to develop single page application by using routing, right? So what are the different routing concepts like we have it? Finally, like in the basic concepts, you need to know like how you debug an Angular application. So this is a must. Okay, it's not like you'll always be working on a new project, right? So you'll be working on an existing project most of the times, 90%, right? So you need to know like how to debug an existing application and try to get a relevant information so that you can uh, you can understand the overall architecture. Okay. Next comes, then we'll dive into the advanced concepts here. And there are so many advanced concepts because Angular is a framework and it has a lot of concepts buried within it, right? So we'll be discussing one by one. Among them, like okay, how to traverse the children, because when you're writing a component, right? Component is nothing but it's a simple user-defined tag, which looks similar to an HTML tag, right? So how you can traverse through those particular tags, right? How you can get reference to that particular tag, right? And these concepts, they very much align to what you see it in the HTML world, right? So let's say, for example, if you want to get a reference of or a reference of an div or like an input element in HTML, right? You'll use document.get element by ID, and then you can get it, right? The same way, you should also have a way to get a reference of an Angular component, because Angular component is used in your application, right? So Angular does provide that kind of API, where you can use that API and get the reference of that particular component. Okay, so all that stuff, we'll be discussing in this chapter. Sometimes, I included this 12th chapter recently. Okay, so it was not there. It was not there, in the previous course also. Okay, in the previous course, but in the but now I included because one of the use cases, one of the developer brought was they have something an authorable solution, right? An authored solution is nothing but where people will drag and drop the components, right? And behind the scenes, they have to generate all these components, right? So how to generate a dynamic component? So that is what the use case was. So that's why I included this building dynamic components, and it is very much useful when you are writing an authorable solution. An authorable solution is you might have saw a few tools, like say for example in the PowerPoint itself, right? PowerPoint has a lot many tools where you can prepare a slide, right? You can drag and drop and do all that stuff. So when you drag and drop, what's happening is behind the scenes, automatically those components are getting generated, right? So how to generate those components, how to create dynamic components. So that stuff we'll be discussing in this chapter. And nowhere this I saw so many Angular courses, they talk a little about dynamic components there, but they are very much useful in the real-time projects. Okay, and we'll be covering in depth the dynamic components. 13th one is a miscellaneous topic, but it's good to know. Okay, and the 14th one is the important of all these chapters, which is nothing but change detection and encapsulation. I mean, encapsulation is not that important, but change detection is the one where you will learn how Angular is really maintaining these components and the interactions, right? What is that algorithm which Angular runs behind the scenes in order to keep the components in sync, in order to keep that component tree in sync, right? So you will learn those concepts in this change detection, and most of your interview questions will be around this change detection. If you're applying for any advanced role in Angular, this is where people will really touch. Okay, and we'll also be developing custom directives and pipes. I'm going to show you an international localization component. Let's keep it simple. I'll discuss about the localization component, how to develop a localized component by using pipes, and also show you a tooltip directive, right? So how to develop a tooltip. So that we'll be covering in this chapter. The 16th one is nothing but it's a reactive forms, which is otherwise which is also known as model-driven forms. So this is the stuff which I already discussed when I discussed about template forms. 17th one is the one which most of the projects are really using nowadays. If you see any modern projects, they are not using the component architecture a lot. Okay, people are moving to the NGRX store based, the reactive state management based applications. Okay, NGRX store is a concept which is developed by Redux. Okay, if anyone is familiar about React, Redux is one of the important libraries in React. React with Redux is one of the things which became popular. And what Redux developers did was Redux designers, what they did was they developed a similar component for Angular as well. Okay, and they are basically meant for developing React-based applications. That's what they're meant for. Okay, so In this particular chapter, there is a lot of knowledge, like okay, which you have to remember. Okay, that means there are a lot of steps. Okay, like how to write actions, how to write reducers, right? How to write selectors, how to write effects. So there is a lot of best practices, like okay, which you need to follow. And if you follow those steps, you can write any NGRX store based application within few minutes, within few hours. Okay, all you need to know is like okay, how to write them. Then after that, like okay, once you have all those things in place, it's all about like okay, adding in new stuff here and there. It's all cookie cutter work. Okay. Um, that's what like okay, we'll be discussing about the 17th chapter. There is also one more small bonus chapter, like okay, which is not included here, but that is about the unit testing, right? So um, it's a very viable question. Like okay, you are writing a component, right? So you need to test it. Nowadays, like okay, market for there is no market for like okay manual QA. Okay, the developers themselves are like okay QA, and they write code in order to test their application, right? So unit testing is a must, and everyone has to know about like okay, how to write the unit test cases. And so I'm going to cover a chapter on how to write a unit test case for a component, for different sets of components, right? Pipe, services, and how to test it. Okay, so that I'll be covering it. Finally, like if anyone is willing to like okay, apply for any Angular position, I'll definitely cover the interview questions. I'm going to give them the tips like okay, which are required. Um, especially like all the stuff like I've gone through for the last 3 to 4 years with the interviews, right? We're providing all that knowledge, which will be really helpful to you guys. That's it. If anyone has any questions, please ask me. Otherwise, like we can wind it up. Okay. I think there is a question here. Is there any defined process to work with GitHub? Uh, GitHub from Angular framework. Can you just elaborate? I think it is asked by Naga. Can you please elaborate like what exactly like you are looking for from GitHub in order to work with Angular framework? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Mohan. Uh, are you able to hear?
Yes, I'm able to hear.
Yeah. Mohan, it's like, see, for example, if we are working with a local repository, this is fine. But if we want to use a GitHub, is there any, I mean, like a different strategy or process we have to follow to access the Git and because I'm seeing in my organization, people are developing different app servers for every app.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's what
So
I am not
yeah,
sure about that. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm asking because I'm quite new to the Angular. Uh,
okay. Yeah.
yeah,
So
if
yeah,
something
let
wrong,
me
just
clarify, right? So Git and Angular are two different things. Okay. And give me a second. Give me a second. Give me one.
mm,
Sorry for that. Okay. So coming back to your question, right? So Git and Angular are two different things. Okay. So Git is nothing to do with Angular. Okay. If you develop an, I think like
okay.
okay, your question is like you're going to develop an Angular application, right? How to check in that stuff into GitHub, right? How to upload your Angular app into GitHub. GitHub is just a
Mm,
repository like wherein you store the code, right? You store your code. You have the regular check-in checkout process, and then you can deal with that, right? So that is what the Git is meant for. Angular is meant for like, okay, developing your application. So once you develop your application, you want to basically like, okay, check in your stuff so that other developers can check it out and then they can work on the copy, right? Uh, I can show you an example like, okay, how to upload your Angular project into GitHub. Okay, so that I can cover as part of this course. Am I
Okay.
clear?
So,
Did I answer your question?
yeah, yes. Actually, maybe I was not able to give you the full information. Maybe when we
Mhm.
meet it again, maybe I will be able to provide that sufficient information and get some answer from you. Uh, Actually, it's
Right.
some different process they are following to develop any application before setting. I mean, before writing any application, they are doing some framework setup, which is not usually with Angular.
Okay.
Maybe
Fine.
I will come back to you on that.
Sure. Yeah. No problem. So the
Okay.
next question,
Thanks.
let me go in the chronological order, right? So, okay, so the next question is from Satish. Actually, Satish is the one like who asked the first question, but I'm sorry. His question was like, are these concepts based on Angular 5 or 4 or 5, right? There's not much difference between Angular 4 and 5. Okay, just to explain you about the evolution of Angular, right? So, I mean, when Angular has started, it was called as Angular JS. It is a JavaScript library, okay? And but Angular JS uh, has its own problems. Like, okay, it's not a scalable framework because on mobile, especially, like, okay, it really its performance it really degrades. Okay, so that is where like, okay, Google developers thought like, okay, they need to come up with a different framework because they are having tough competition on the other hand with Facebook framework, which is nothing but React. So that is where like, okay, they came with Angular 2. Now Angular 2 is not, people usually call people like, okay, most of the people I saw like they call Angular 2 as Angular JS2, but that is not the right one. Okay, Angular JS is Angular version 1. Okay, that is what Angular JS is. Angular 2 is not Angular JS2, it's Angular 2. Okay, so Angular 2, 3, 4, so these are all, they belong to one family. Okay, but whereas Angular JS, which is Angular 1, okay, it belongs to a different family. That is completely written on JavaScript. But whereas all these stuff from Angular 2, they all follow the same concepts like modules, components, and all this stuff. Okay, even Angular JS also has these concepts, but it is all JavaScript. Like, okay, if you are dealing with the JavaScript, then um, and and also like, okay, it is quite different from Angular 2 and beyond. Okay, so don't compare with Angular JS with Angular 2. Fine. So now coming back to your question, right? So Angular 4 and 5, right? So there are a few differences between 4 and 5, and of course between 5 and 6 as well. Okay. Um, Basically, this course covers Angular 5, which is the key thing like, okay, we are focusing on right now. But that said, like, okay, we'll also be covering few concepts of Angular 6 as well. Okay. Right. So if you know Angular 5, I'm pretty much sure like, okay, you can also deal with Angular 4. All right. So the next question is Soumya. Okay. Oh no, it's Nagamohan. Okay. I'm a UI designer. This course is help for me, or it's only for developers. So you are an UI designer in the sense like you are developing only websites. Is that right?
Yes, Mohan.
Yeah.
Hi, Mohan.
Okay. Yeah, I
Are
can
you
hear
hear
you.
me?
Yes.
Yeah, Mohan. Actually, basically, I'm a UI designer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving the HTML wireframes to developers like that. But I don't know about the AngularJS. But right now in market, they are asking for the AngularJS. That's why
Oh,
I'm attending this demo. Is it
okay.
helpful for me? it's need basically I don't have any knowledge in development. That's the main thing.
Oh, okay. It depends upon your project requirement, right? So what your project really asks for, right? So, or like, if you're applying for any UI designer job when they are asking for the Angular expertise, then you have to learn programming for sure. Okay, so there is no other way like we can escape it out, right? So, but if you want to like really stick to only the UI designer, I would say I would not recommend this course.
Okay.
Okay, so this course is should have some programming background for sure. Okay, and I don't want to like give you I don't want to give a false promise saying like, okay, yeah, anyone can learn this course. Not like that. Okay, this course is meant for developers.
Okay, thank you, Mohan.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, the next question in this course, will I be able to learn how to connect Angular with the backend? Yes, you are. You are. Okay. But the backend here is like, okay, it's a mock server, but I am going to, that mock server is a remote server. Okay. So you're going to hit the remote server and you're going to fetch the data. Not the business logic data, but we are going to mock it. Mock in the sense like, okay, something like which is static enough. Okay. Static data like which you are going to pull it from a remote server. That means that you have to still connect to the remote server and you have to fetch the data. Because this course is a UI part of the course, right? We are not interested on the server side aspect of it. Right? So that's the reason like we will keep server side as minimal as possible with simple mock data, and we'll focus more on the UI side, like how to fetch the data and how to supply the data to the components. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's all I have. I think those are the questions like asked. Okay, good. Any more questions or like okay, we can wind it up. All right. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you. Hi everyone, small info from my end. The batch will be starting from Tuesday onwards, and for timings and other details, please do check your mails. And if anyone hasn't provided details, please provide so that we can schedule the batch start details along with the time. It will be for us to coordinate if you can provide your details. Thank you.
I think Lakshmi, you have to repeat it. Maybe like okay, you can send out an email to everyone. So yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.